Good evening, everyone. We'll call to order the 12th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of School Administrative District number 52. We'll start off our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Bree is not here, but we'll hand it over to Peter.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item of business is to act on the minutes from the 11th regular meeting. It's January 23rd. Anyone have any thoughts or comments on those minutes? Seeing none, they're approved by unanimous consent. I am going to move quickly past my board report tonight. We've got a full agenda, and I want to save time for that. So we'll move into public comment. Is there anyone here in the public that would like to speak? Yes. Okay. I just want to remind folks that our board meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying out the official business of our schools. It's important to note that the meetings of the board are open to the public, however they are not public forums. At each full meeting of the board, time is allocated to provide opportunities for citizens and employees to express opinions and concerns related to the matters under consideration by the board. These comments shall be within the guidelines set forth in policy BEDH, public participation at board meetings. Copies of the policy are available here and on the district's website. I'd like to highlight the following. The chair is responsible for recognizing all speakers. We ask that speakers identify themselves by sharing their name and town of residence. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes to express their views. Speakers should direct all comments to the board, specifically the board chair. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to the opinions of the public that relate to school and education matters. It is not intended to be a conversation or a debate of issues. We know that school-related issues can be emotional, but we ask that civility is maintained. We will not permit profanity, gossip, defamatory comments, shouting at one another, or comments that disparage or attack individuals or groups. The board is faced with many important issues, so for the sake of efficiency, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments. The board will also not permit complaints or allegations against staff members. We certainly care about these concerns, but they are personnel matters which the board is not permitted to hear in public. If there are complaints against staff, these will be handled appropriately through our complaint policy KE. To reiterate, this is just a highlight of key points. Please refer to policy BEDH for a complete description of our public participation policy. So with that.
Crystal Nichols from Green. After receiving a district mailing informing parents of the administration of the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, I investigated the high school question banks available online, expecting the usual leading questions about number of sexual partners and when students started having sex, which would be influencing enough. I was concerned to see sections of the survey read as a laundry list of name brands of vaping products, illicit drugs, and medications. In advertising, the foremost goal is name recognition. Students who may have never even heard of vaping are now introduced to a variety of electronic vaping products and ideas as to how to obtain them. I learned that vaping products come in a wide variety of flavors. Students will learn about flavors like tobacco and alcoholic drinks, edgy choices like menthol, helpful sounding flavors like fruit or mint, and just plain fun ones like candy or chocolate. Do parents know that kids are introduced to dozens of brand names like Juul, Views, Enjoy, Elf Bar, Escobar, Copenhagen, Grizzly, Skoal, Camel Snooze, On, Zinn, or Velo? For cigarette-type products, the survey helpfully mentions Swisher Sweets, Middletons, including Black & Mild, and Backwoods. Let's stop pretending here we all lived through this the first time around with Big Tobacco. These names are designed to be catchy, appealing, and enticing to children. And Mimas brings it all home to your child and family. We are told, quote, participating in this survey will cause little or no risk to your child, unquote. At best, this statement is careless without supporting evidence. Where is the data? Were certain children tracked? What are the parameters of harm? Especially with children, it's important to ensure surveys do not inadvertently promote particular products, so no products should be mentioned. This liberal use of brand names is known to create curiosity or interest in these brands, which may well have negative consequences or the opposite intended effect of the survey. If the true focus of the survey is indeed behaviors, product placement and identity is counterproductive. Please be aware and reconsider that this survey will actually spread knowledge of negative health behaviors. Please remove it altogether so students can focus on their learning results. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? None? We will move on to communications. I do not have any communications this meeting. Carrie?
Yep, so I have some retirements to announce. James Fodder, second grade teacher at Turner Primary School. Kim Fuller, principal at Turner Primary School. Deb Knapp, math teacher at the high school. And Donna Timms, special education at Tech 3 here at the high school. So all those are effective at the end of the school year. One resignation, Nemo Mwasa, adult ed teacher, effective March 21st. And 2 Ed Tech 3 hires, Peggy Bryant at Turner Primary School, Resource Special Education, and Jacqueline Bronish, Lead Central School Resource Special Education. And we had 3 substitutes join our ranks.
Thank you very much. Seeing no questions, we'll move on. Hi, Ashley. I didn't even see you. Adjustments to the agenda. There are a couple red items that you'll see on your agenda in front of you now, which were different than the original posting. One is item 8.5, which is in addition to our consent agenda, and one is item 10.5, which we'll consider at the end of our new business. I don't believe there's anything else, Gary. Yeah. So we'll move into committee reports. First one, 7.1, Finance Committee. Ashley.
We did not meet. Our next meeting will be on the 27th at Trib Mills.
Very good. PTB, Kyle.
We met today, or tonight. We discussed a few things, one being the wood chip delivery. We got trying to figure out how we actually going to be able to get some of these chips. We have difficulties getting them into the wood chip room for delivery. Right now, currently, it's happening with Thompson Enterprise. They deliver a good product, and we're hoping to keep that relationship going and looking at options of trying to facilitate that delivery. We talked about some grants, and we got some good news that sounds like we're the $750,000 that we've requested. We getting $600,000 of that in a grant, so that's been approved. So the MSAB52 would be on the hook for $150,000. We discussed some of the EEI updates that we've had them researching. TPS water tank replacement. They're meeting tomorrow to discuss our options, and then from there, once we find our options, we can look at what that cost is going to look like. We're moved on to the diesel tank replacement. We're going to put that on hold a little bit, because right now it's not one of the biggest priorities that we're discussing, so we're going to sit back and kind of put that on the back burner. We discussed the TMS HVAC and got a little bit more clarity on that, just since there was questions on it, based off of some of the upgrades that's needed over there. And then Jim we talked about the transportation updates. They've just pulled out the new scraper and was able to use it on the buses, and then, from what it sounds like, it's working good. And then we are switching from and trying to pick up a different third-party group for driving. Went from switching from Beaumont to Roadsource, and that's in the infancy stages as we speak. Then, I've handed out the EEI feasibility study that was been working on for a couple of years, that they've handed out in September of 25, which goes through the whole property and discussing all the issues that we have around the campus and concerns. And so Carrie's going to take it at 10.3 to discuss further detail of where our capital projects are going to be looking like. So stay tuned.
Yeah, if you don't mind me adding, I think you've all gotten this link emailed to you at some point here, but the heft of the actual report is a little more impressive. So this is not necessarily new, but it's definitely pertinent tonight. So.
Yeah.
Quick question on the wood chips. Is it we're not able to get them, or they're not delivering them?
No, the issue is the trailers that the company that we're going through that has the chip, they don't have the trailer set up. That's the,
Yeah, so the trailers they have a one door that swings open, so they have to offset the trailer to put it back into the garage door, basically. So the trailer itself is too big to do that. He has one driver that he uses as a sub that we use every 3 days to deliver. That has the old barn door style that can fit into it.
So he bought a new trailer.
He subs out drivers as a
So
contractor.
I just was curious because we've had chips for
Yeah.
decades.
Well, we have a new source where we went with Thompson Enterprises this year instead of Cusino Brothers. So it's a new vendor this year with a better wood chip. They're not out of the woods, they're stored in a bin, so they're dry hardwood chips, and they burn extremely well.
One of the issues with the old chips was they were long
Yeah, no,
and
yeah,
solidly,
so-
and they didn't feed well. So now
Yep.
we've got good chips that are working well, but it's hard to deliver.
Are they a lot more money?
No.
Oh, But they just
I mean,
can't
it's
get, they just don't have a
compared
truck to,
It was actually slightly cheaper
Yeah.
than what we were getting.
but the truck issue is becoming an issue.
So the contractor that we're currently using now is potentially going to revisit his cost structure, even though when he and I had a conversation a few months ago now, he assured me that he thinks that the price would remain the same. But then we ran into these issues, so we're not sure.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Kyle. Anyone else have questions? All right. Policy Committee, Jamie.
We didn't meet tonight. Our next meeting is the 27th at Tripp Middle School. Do you want me to touch on the policies that are on the consent agenda?
Yes, that would be very helpful, yes.
We have two policies, IJOC, which is school volunteers. This was originally two separate policies, so we had school volunteers and then we had volunteer coaches. And so we just combined them into one policy and just to streamline it. And then we changed two things. One that was discussed at policy was originally it said that we conducted a sex offender registry check, but that's included in the criminal background check. We checked with Maine State and everything checked out, but we did write the Maine criminal background check, including sexual offenses, in the policy, just to be clear on that. So you'll see a deletion of that because it was a duplicate, but then a clarification after criminal background check. And then we made sure that Ryan LaRoche reviewed it as well and that it met MPA guidelines for our volunteer coaches as well. So, yeah, that's that one. And then the second one is JKD. This is suspension of students. This was updated to reflect Maine state law, which you'll see at the very beginning. There's a clarification that kids in grades 6 and above can receive out-of-school suspensions, but grade 5 and below cannot receive out-of-school suspension. It's in-school suspension for them to keep them in the classrooms. So that was the big update on that one.
These were unanimous from committee?
Yes, yep, they were all unanimous from committee after we kind of worked out some wording on them.
Any other questions? You are? Okay. So, well, we'll have more conversation on those then soon.
Awesome.
Any, so thank you. We'll move on to curriculum. One of the reasons why curriculum was moved to Tuesday is because Bree cannot be here. I don't know if there's someone else in the curriculum committee who'd like to give a brief update.
We met Tuesday night, and we met with the math curriculum leadership team. So there was a decent number of teachers there from that. I think all of them were there from that team, and they presented the process they went through for looking at the different math programs and how they were evaluating them. And the program they ended up coming up with that they felt was best to move forward with was illustrative math. So they brought some books, and they also talked about how they went to different schools and were kind of shadowing how that program worked and how some other programs worked that they were looking at and what led them to decide on that one. And I don't know if we have a thing for a full board review, but I'm sure once it becomes official, we can have some more information for everyone to have on what that'll look like and the timeline of when that will be implemented. But it was really informative, and we all left really happy with it.
Do you have any questions about that? Thank you very much. I don't believe we have a student representative report tonight, so we'll move into administrative reports. And we, due to some of the travels that some of the principals had to endure to get here, we don't have all of them. We excused several. So Mr. Parker is not here, neither is Ms. Fuller or Ms. Conway, but we do have our Leavitt Area High School principal, Mr.
He has
Shaw.
quite a trip. Why'd we make him?
Yeah. I did offer.
My extensive commute did not disappoint. The only addition that I would share beyond the report that I provided is just a reminder. You guys probably know this already, but tomorrow is a big day around here. It's Winter Carnival Day, and students have been anxiously awaiting their, or preparing, I guess I should say, for their air bands tomorrow afternoon. They were practicing in here last night until 9 o'clock, I think, this evening's from here, after a hard-fought indoor soccer game after school. So it's been busy. There's been a lot of students involved, and looking forward to actually tomorrow. It's a culmination of the reading challenge, in which somebody gets to tape me to the wall in the gym with duct tape. So I'm also looking forward to that.
Okay.
You actually stay on your feet and...
I put a stool in. Yeah, I take the stool out against.
Okay.
Sounds like a trust challenge.
Real quick, just two real quick things, Evan. On the LRTC, which thank you for compiling that, but just to clarify from reading it and so forth, and getting my math right, the first box above where it says the first year, so basically, say we have 21, 22, for example. We have 46 applications, and we had a total of 33 kids go in. So we don't pay much attention to the second year enrollment, correct?
The second year enrollment we do.
But I mean, for one of the issues that I was looking at is how many kids are not being able to partake of the options. So does that...
Part of the reason the second year enrollment is lower is because not all the programs are 2-year programs. So the students that are accepted the first year for 1-year programs, they don't show up on the second year enrollment. So that's the major reason, that's the only reason that the second year enrollment will be less than the year one.
So just for last year, or no, for this year, sorry, for this year, is the math right that 25 students who submitted applications could not due to lack of seating? Or is it actually significantly opposite of that? So did 25 students this year not be able to participate?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of the numbers we're looking at. Okay. So in general, like last year, 46 students couldn't participate. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
The other question I have is, are we back at doing SATs and ACTs and getting kids signed up for them here, or?
Well, students we sign students up. We sign students up for the SAT and whatever other
options
tests they want to take. We are not a testing center because it's no longer a state assessment. But we have students who they'll go in April and March, or I can't remember what's coming up. Lewis is a testing center, so is Yale.
So it's easy now for any of our student body who want to take it, can go through guidance, and they can help them.
Anytime.
Take care of it. Okay, good. Thank you.
Go ahead.
For the students that didn't get enrolled that wanted to, do you know off the top of your head, what, are there like only a couple programs that are really high demand, or is it kind of a mix that are, you know?
So the vocational type programs, I'm gonna say, like, I'm not gonna name them all because I'm gonna miss some, but automotives, electricity, welding, the healthcare with the nursing ones, those are high demand. So we'll get a lot of students to apply for those. I say a lot, it's all relative, but we'll get a number of students to apply for those. And typically we have one, or if we're lucky, 2 seats for those particular programs. There are other programs like, I'm gonna get the name wrong, but it's a business program. We might have like 7 seats, but we might only get 2 kids that are interested in it. So there's a significant discrepancy based on the program itself.
Is it true that kids will put in like their first choice and their second choice, so if they don't get their first choice, they might get their backup? So I don't know this to be true, but for example, now that EMT is being offered, the student who may have wanted nursing may end up doing EMT, which is still in the field they're interested in as a possibility.
Right. And it's, I can't say this happens 100% of the time, but I'm gonna say it happens most of the time. If a student doesn't make it into one of their choices, Mrs. Poole will be like, I have options here if you're interested in any one of these. And sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. We'll move on to the Assistant Superintendent's report. Ms. Gillis.
So an update on curriculum work. I have continued my on-site visits. This last time I was at Turner Primary School to observe the implementation of interreading. I observed a writing lesson, a reading lesson, and was also able to see 2 classrooms taking the online assessments. Their weekly assessment is what that one was called. The Math Materials Selection Committee, like Ashley mentioned, has finalized their work, sent their recommendations to the Ed Leadership Team for review, and our plans are to implement illustrative math in grades 3 through 8 next year and have an early adopter at grade 2 at TPS. We have a teacher selected for that. And the following year, add kindergarten through grades 2. The rationale for that is this will give our K-2 teachers an additional year to focus on the reading and writing implementation, the program into reading. Some of this decision and recommendation has to do with the cost. And also beginning in grade 3, some of our teachers are departmentalized and therefore only teach math or English language arts. Additionally, TES and TMS currently do not have a consistent program that is being used. The work of the Math Standards Review Team is nearly complete. I'm working on entering the pre-K math standards into Atlas and also working with a high school math network and instructional coach to finalize these vertically aligned standards. My hope is to present these at the curriculum committee on March 12th. For professional development, since this group has last met on January 27th, the elementary staff worked at Leeds Central School. We were provided breakfast and lunch. It was very good through our food service department. So thanks to Dave Roberts, who helped me with the planning, and our cooks, Danielle Stevens and Genevieve Morse, the head cooks at Leeds and Green, respectively. Our work that day included on math, reading and writing, and all pre-K to 6 teachers were given an overview of the Atlas curriculum. As we're working that, we're trying to make sure that more people understand the purpose and what it can do. And then lastly, last night, the Workforce Ready RPP, so WFR RPP, for some letters there, I'll explain that in a minute. So last night, we have a Workforce Ready team from our district with myself, Mary Leonard from Tripp, Alicia Soroy and Kaylee Getty from Levitt, Kara Getty, our district gifted and talented teacher, Danny Gay, a teacher from Leeds, Stacy LeClaire and Jeff Sear, who are our computer science teachers, and they cover TES, TPS, and Leeds, respectively. Ran our first computer science family night. You might have heard some of the publicity around it. It was called Bite the Night, B-Y-T-E. We brought together local businesses. We had people from Ricker Hill Farms, Burgeen Farms, and the Turner Public Library, as well as district staff, plus our SRO, Tyler Ham. And we had some student volunteers from both Tripp and Levitt. This was a 2-hour event for students in grades K to 8 and their families. We think there were maybe 200 people there, but we did not count. Activities included a drone demonstration, cyber safety, photo booth with a green screen, Lego and Bex robotics, as well as some unplugged activities, cup stacking, and a coding map. And I just wanted to explain a little bit, but I've talked to Carrie and asked if in the future we can do a presentation that's more in-depth. So our Workforce Ready group is in year 3. I've been participating for 3 years, as has a few of the other teachers on the team. First of all, it was just K to 8 teachers. It was recently expanded to include high school, so we had 2 high school people join us this year. And a Workforce Ready research practice partnership emphasizes the and, so it's research and practice. And we're the practitioners, and then we have folks that work for Maine Math and Science Alliance that are the researchers. We bring together the knowledge that we as educators have, as well as what is known in the research, and we're particularly working to co-investigate how computer science and computational thinking can impact students. So I'll provide more information about that in the future. But it was very well attended, and I will say that we had students that I were not even sure were in pre-K come through 8th grade, and I think we had some older students, and they represented all 3 towns. So it wasn't just, we were concerned that if we had it at one of the Turner schools, people wouldn't come, but having it at Tripp, I think, helped everybody. It's a really good night.
Am I correct that you said there's one school that doesn't have the same interreading curriculum that the others are doing?
No, I think you were
that's
talking about math.
Okay.
Math,
Next year, everyone will be doing the same in
But
math.
will be with the new
Yes.
curriculum.
yeah.
Yeah.
But you're correct in that Turner Primary School will only have one early adopter because they're our K-2 school. None of the K-2 teachers, with the exception of one, will be implementing math next year. They're going to continue their focus on interreading.
Okay.
And then we'll add illustrative math the following year.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I hope the findings of computational thinking and programming are positive for students. I hope that I don't know what other finding they're going to come to. Hopefully it doesn't hurt them, but
No.
anyhow. Moving on, Carrie, superintendent's report.
I'm going to be quick because you're going to hear way too much from me. Kim Fuller's retiring. I'll say she was going to be here tonight, but with the weather, I'll say more at the next meeting, just in terms of the really good work she's done at Turner Primary. So I just want to acknowledge that. We've met about setting up a timeline for searching for the next principal for Turner Primary School. I'm going to meet with the staff on February 26th to talk about that. We're basically going to follow the same process we did looking for the principal at Leeds. So the good news is there's sort of like a template for that, and that worked out pretty good. So the goal will be to have a candidate here no later than May 1st to be able to sort of move into the summer with a known leadership. So that's where that stands. On the consent agenda, in terms of job descriptions, we're removing Title I teacher from the job descriptions. We don't have one. We don't have them. There's an updated job description for the athletic director. There's some staff members that he now supervises beyond coaches, so that needed to be updated, and some minor tweaks, nothing major. And then the probationary teacher who's being recommended to go forth is Chelsea Fournier from Turner Primary. She was hired right around December last year, so this is actually the completion of her first probationary year. Typically it's in June, but she was hired mid-year when another teacher left. So Chelsea Fournier at Turner Primary is the teacher being recommended to move forward. Then, my last thing, we had 21 teachers nominated for Teacher of the Year. Last year was 23, so we're still doing pretty good. So I just want to read their names. From Green, Nancy Ellis, who also was nominated last year. So there's a couple of second-year nominees. So Nancy Ellis at Green and Aubrey Futera at Green. From the high school, Alicia Henderson, Jessica Talbot, Sarah Thistle, and Dustin Williamson. From Leeds, April Gagnon, Jude Lever, Lauren Flosse, and Tammy Scott. Tammy was also nominated last year. Every single school had nominees, by the way. TES has Kyla Greenwood and Venice Philbrook. The middle school had Matt Druell and Lindsay Williams. And then from Turner Primary, Amy Duguay, Melissa Kimball, Arenda Laborde, Emily Libby, Linnell Morin Towers, Deanna Wilkinson, and Cheryl Woodard. So a really great list, and I think parents and staff members do a good job. I talked to a couple of the superintendents; they didn't have double digits, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. Not competitive or anything.
Great. Any questions there, guys? All right. So we'll move into the consent agenda. Consent agenda, a reminder that these items are to be acted upon collectively unless a board member asks that a specific item be acted upon individually. Tonight, our consent agenda consists of item 8.1, review and adoption of superintendent recommendation for deletion of job descriptions, 8.1.1, Title I teacher. Item 8.2, review and adoption of superintendent recommendation of revised job descriptions, 8.2.1, athletic director at Ledbury High School. Item 8.3, consideration and approval of the Finance Committee recommended November expenditure and operating reports. Item 8.4, the consideration of Policy Committee recommended first reading and acknowledgement of revised policies. 8.41, IJOC school volunteers. 8.42, JKD suspension and expulsion. And item 8.5, to act on the reappointment of the following for the 24-25 school year, which is 8.51, probationary contract teacher, second year. Is there a member that would like to pull
May I
something?
request 8.4?
Yes. So we'll take 8.4 out. And because Carrie has so much back-to-back presentations tonight, I think we'll move that somewhere in the middle to give you a break. We'll say between item 10.2 and 10.3, we'll bring in 8.4. So kind of a 10.2 and a half, we'll bring in 8.4. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 8.4? Kyle?
Second.
Second by Peter. All those in favor? That was everyone. Is there anyone opposed? Anthony is opposed. Still passes. So going through old business to new business, item 10.1 is a discussion of the budget preparation schedule and process. So Carrie,
So nothing has changed about this, but I thought since we're going right into that season, we should just review one more time. So we have been working furiously in January and February to prepare an initial budget that will come to you on February 27th. I present that budget, provide you will have executive summaries to review. But if you recall, you all did not want each director to sort of read the executive summaries to you, that would be something that you would be doing on your own in preparation for the first workshop. So that really will be Gabby and I presenting on the budget side and the revenue side and asking big picture questions, because obviously you wouldn't have had time to dig into every single line at that point. I'll be giving some general overview around funding tonight. Then we move into the first workshop. We'll start at 5 p.m. because I do anticipate that it'll take a long time. We are going to have some like sandwiches and stuff just so we can take a break and make sure people can eat. But we'll see we also made a change to do the warrant articles in order. So we will do that. The big warrant articles are 1 and 2. They take the longest. 1 is the one that deals with all the schools. So you'll see every principal present, and special ed is just a really big budget. So you'll see the principals and special ed. Other instruction will also be Jana and Evan, because that's where athletics and co-curriculars live. Student and staff support is Wally Technology, Teresa for, geez,
Warner.
is that student and staff support? Yeah.
Yes.
So Wally and Teresa pretty much are the two that present in Warrant Article 5. Gabby and I do system administration and school administration. System administration is central office. School administration are our principals and assistant principals and the main offices in each building. Then we get into the ones that are a little bit more obvious. Transportation, so we have a meeting in between March 6th and March 20th. That's just a regular meeting. But I assume that if, there are questions at that meeting around budget, certainly I would imagine we would entertain those. And then we'll do the rest of the warrant articles on March 20th. Same format with some sandwiches. March 27th is a regular board meeting. And then April 3rd is one if we need it. April 10th would be sort of when it is finalized, and that really becomes sort of like a hard deadline, because without having a budget on that date, we really can't meet all of our other deadlines for getting it out to the public and then having the budget meeting and the referendum in the town. So there's legal deadlines for all of that we have to follow. So April 10th really is a drop dead deadline. Really can't do it earlier than that because we won't have the final information about insurance. That's sort of the very last piece of the puzzle that always comes at the end. So that's what it looks like as a reminder. And then the district budget meeting is one that we're all at, May 8th. We're in the auditorium. We have a moderator who sort of walks us through. It kind of runs like a town meeting. And then whatever budget is agreed upon at that meeting is the one that goes to referendum. So just.
Anyone have any questions with the budget process? Nope. Could be a little different this year, but hopefully good. And we'll see. All right. Moving on to item 10.2, presentation of 279 preliminary subsidy.
Let's just get the party started. All right. We have I didn't count. I have no idea. Extras come back though, because I want to make sure Crystal and Bree get theirs. I think I'm going to walk over there because otherwise the owl will pick up my voice and not the presentation. I will go last. How did that happen?
So, is there a different input?
I literally just, it was working there and I moved and stopped working. Let me see if I can connect to.
Somebody got funky with the topic.
We gotta like,
You want to be able to point. We got to get you a pointer.
No.
There's a cable there.
No, I get what they're doing.
Hardwire.
Wait, let me get this. I know, right? Well, I may have to share with you, see if you can connect.
Well, you guys both have Apple, I can always try to connect.
She's got,
Well, it was working. Okay, give it a try.
There you go.
No,
No, it's gone.
this went black.
Now it's thinking. Thinking.
No, it's not thinking.
It was a big circle.
What the heck? Can I get a little bit more? Or push the TV forward.
How about I push the TV?
Yeah. No, that's not gonna be the right one. Nope.
So it's what you had earlier, right? Is it something that we want to try?
Wally?
No, Wally's.
Yeah, Wally.
Yours again, Wally.
Absolutely.
How is that possible?
What's that called?
None of those are used.
LHS teacher card?
So it says it's August 4th, so.
Yeah, I know, and it doesn't matter because I couldn't do it the other night. She had to do it.
It's cold for August. There we go.
Don't move.
No, we don't.
No, there's something Bucky has in there.
All right, well, we're gonna go, good thing I printed it. All right, well, I'm gonna stand here anyway, just because I'm already here. Okay, so, first, school funding 101. We've got 2 new members. This is like gonna be drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of information, it's super complex. So, I just wanna do some reminders. The law that governs state funding for schools is called Essential Programs and Services, EPS. That law is essentially the formula. We submit data every fall about our kids and about our staff. That data gets run through whatever huge formula they have, and it spits out, this is how much cost to run schools according to the Essentials EPS formula. The state takes that pot of money and says, we've got to fund 55% of that by law, right? So it's all that data we submit. How much will that cost? The state's got to come up with 55% of that. So it's not 55% of each district's budget, because some districts get more money than others. We get a lot more money than like most of Cumberland County, right? We get 70% from EPS comes to us. So we're a high receiver district. Yarmouth, they get money, but they have to contribute so much to get that. So they're a low receiver district.
That's what I'm looking at.
So, state subsidy, and what's that? Yeah, there you go, good job. Oh, because I shared it with the other day. Good, excellent. All right, so there are 2 pots of money that we get from there, or 2 parts of the formula that tell us what we need to do. The first is state subsidy. This is how much money the state's just going to give us. But EPS works like this. You will get that money if you, as a community, contribute this amount of money. So that's the required local contribution. So the state says we'll give you $18 million. I think last year our number was somewhere around $18 million, but we're only going to give you $18 million if your towns come up with 800,000 something last year, right? Round numbers. But that's how it works. They require the locals to contribute to be able to get that amount of money. So that's the state subsidy piece. The second pot of money that we get is the additional local. So we put together a budget, we put all of this revenue in, and whatever the gap is between what the state will give us and what the locals are required to give us, and then any other money that we have, that gap gets filled by what's considered the additional local contribution. That's always the part that you want to try and control. It's really hard, and it's really hard for people to understand why that number, typically, the percent increase to our locals is higher than the increase of our budget. So I think at one point last year, maybe not last year, to my first budget, that one was, the budget went up like 7%, but the increase to the locals was like 12%. So those numbers don't match, and it makes it hard for people to understand why that is. And it is because it's about what that additional local fund is. How much more money do we need to close the gap? Because EPS, as I'll go over, what they consider essential and what the reality of what's essential is, right now there's a fundamental sort of disconnect between those. The state is doing some research and is funding some studies to look at EPS to say like, all right, maybe it needs to be adjusted, but it hasn't been adjusted yet. So there's a couple places that I'll walk through that are sort of the gaps for what is considered essential. The third pile of money we get is grants. These are all outside the budget, but they contribute to how we run the schools. So we have ESEA grants, which are title grants. We talk about title grants all the time. That's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, maybe. I don't remember. ESEA. Local entitlement is the federal money we get for special education. Again, that is separate from the budget. It does not contribute. It doesn't sort of offset. It helps us to pay for special ed, but it's not part of the budget. And nutrition is self-sustaining. So we do get money for that, but we don't have to put any money into there. So they just run their show and get their own money. And then a small pot of money that I just want to say out loud keeps the budget from getting high is the gate receipts that when we charge tickets to go to games. That's about $20,000, and that is paying for officials. That is stuff that we are not putting in the budget because that amount of money pays for some of what the athletic department needs to keep itself going. There's some other miscellaneous. And when we go over revenue next on the 27th, like we will get interest on some of our, what we're holding in the bank. We'll put carryover from the unallocated fund balance. We'll typically put carryover money. There's some other small things. The carryover is usually the biggest thing. That's usually $500,000, if not more.
There's CDS funding from the state, which is.
Yep, but that's going to be off the budget as well.
It's a state agency.
Right, that if we have foster care children in the district, we get additional money. So those are hard to predict, so we kind of make a guess at what it will be, but it's not like a guarantee because it depends on the kids that you have.
Miscellaneous, which really equates to nothing comparatively.
Selling the old pan.
Sometimes.
Yeah, okay. All right, what's the next one? So, essential program and services. So I jumped ahead. So the big pot of money, 55%, and then of that 55%, they divide it up between all the school districts. And if you really are curious, you can Google the ED279 state of Maine, and you will get a spreadsheet that shows you every single school district now, how much money they got, and whether it was an increase or a decrease. Okay? So can you hit the preliminary ED279 document? So see if you can make it a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to go get mine so I can read it. So I've done this every year that I've been here, sort of make the, did the extras come back here? Yes, here, you can take mine, and just take it so I can look at it. So I annotate this. This is the ED279. This is the document that is sort of provided for funding. So I just want to walk through a couple things. One of the most important numbers on this formula is the number of students we have. So that's up here at the top. And it's an average of the last 2 years. And I do that, I think, to smooth out if you have like weird jumps between years so it doesn't hit you all at one time, especially if it's a decrease. So we're up 13.5 students. I put the things that are good news in green because they're good news. So we're up 13.5 students, and that equates to funding. Give you some examples of essential, right? So in this first box tells you, according to EPS, how many of each of these categories of employees you should have. So the first one is teachers. So according to EPS, with the number of students we should have 121.35 teachers. We actually have 137, right? So smaller class sizes, like trying to manage that, offering AP classes at the high school, things that are not the easiest, like one teacher to 20 kids, those things will increase that number of teachers. Let me give another example. When you go to nurses, so when you go to health, number 4, EPS says we should have 2.5 nurses for all of our district. We have a nurse in every building. So EPS does not fund beyond 2.5 nurses. So that's I think the perfect example of the disconnect between what the law says is essential and what I think most school districts kind of operate as. Another great example are guidance, line 2. According to EPS, we should have 6 guidance counselors. We have 9. We have 1 in every building, every elementary building, 1 in the middle school, and then 3 in the high school. So again, another, like, anybody running schools in this day and age knows that if you don't have enough staff to help with students' mental health and behaviors and things like that, the school doesn't operate, doesn't function. Leeds is a great example of that. It had no guidance counselor last year, right? Very few social workers last year. it was it's been a struggling building. They're fully staffed, and it makes a difference. So these are just really good examples for you to just look at. EPS is the first box, what we have is the second box. You can see that disconnect, and the things that we're above that we don't get funding for. So at the bottom, another example. So we get $269,000 to run central office, systems administration. That's my salary and Gabby's salary. We do not get any subsidy for payroll. I don't know if they think payroll is like essential. But like the rest of the business office is not part of the funding we get for subsidy. The superintendent is required by law. Every school district has to have one. I assume they think we need a business manager, but that's what we have. So again, it's that disconnect of like what we know we have to fund. If we don't have accounts payable, we don't pay our bills. If we don't have payroll, we don't get paid. If we don't have HR, we don't have like any compliance with any of the laws around human resources. So, good news, the per pupil rate for the state has gone up this year. So this first column is elementary. It's gone up $280 from last year, so per elementary student, $7,962. For every secondary student, $8,461. So the secondary one went up $293. So when they calculate things, they take how many elementary kids we have, they multiply it by that. How many high school kids we have, they multiply it by that. Okay? Second page. This economically disadvantaged. So this down here, you'll see right next to it EPS weights. So this, if you recall last year, this was one of our big wins in terms of subsidy, but I want to say wins with a grain of salt because we don't necessarily want more of our students to be considered economically disadvantaged. But if they are, and we're not counting them, then we're not bringing in the amount of money that we really should be. So we want to accurately count the number of our students who are economically disadvantaged. So last year, we really made a push to gather that information. We used the alternate economic forum that the state allows us to do. This used to be traditionally the free and reduced lunch rate, but now that lunch is free, that rate is really pretty unreliable for the full scale of what it probably looks like for economic disadvantage in our community. The alternate economic forum allows us to capture the rest of those numbers. So we are up from last year, 114 students. Those students get multiplied by 0.15, which just means you get more money for them. They count more than just a single student. And then we picked up 6 multilingual students. Those students also get counted additional 0.7. And they count more because they require more services, right? You need to have people to service the needs of those students. So at the bottom, and there's a lot of other stuff in here which I'm happy to answer questions about, but like those are really the big ones that bring in the most. So our increase for the operating allocation for this year is $1.14 million. So that's good news. Most districts did not get that much of an increase. So on the next page is where we get an allocation for special education and transportation. We get a couple more too, but those are really the big ones. So between special ed and transportation, we get an increase of $723,000, which we suspected was going to happen. Our special ed population is going up. So the out-of-district placement number, which is this third number down, is lower than last year. That data is always 2 years behind, so we'd have to go back 2 years to find out. We must have had fewer students outplaced, I'm not sure. But it's 2-year-old data. So that's good news, that's up as well. Next page, there's finally some red here. So things that are up, I guess maybe they're not great. It's good, the mill rate went down. Town valuations went up, which I guess one could say is good news. But we all know the answer, right? If the state says you can pay more, they expect you to pay more. So the increase of the required local contribution, this is the amount of money that our towns must spend if we want to get that 19 million from the other page. They have to pay this amount of money, that's $500,000 more than last year. That is an increase to the towns we do not have control over. If the towns don't pay that, we don't get the rest of the money. So our increase from the state total is up $1.3 million. Last year, our increase was about $2 million. So again, that's good news. We have to pass on more of that required load this year. We've seen increase since I've been here. The first year I was here, we had a real crisis because we lost a ton of funding around the economically disadvantaged, if you remember, if you were here. That was like the big one. We corrected that last year. We continue to correct that this year. So that's moving in our favor. But this piece, that piece is up regardless. And so, yes, go.
So is that $500,000 that we're on the hook for, is that is separate from we're up 1.3?
Correct.
So we're not really up 1.3.
That's how much
We're
more.
up $500,000 less than that.
That's how much the state is going to give us.
Yeah, but when it
pending.
washes out.
Yep. So what the total, so again, here's the state subsidy, the 20 million. You can see that that is 70% of what the total amount of money that we need to collect, which is $29 million up here. So I'm on page, I didn't circle it, but it's page, the 29 million is the total. So it sounds like, oh, we're getting $29 million, but we gotta remember that 800,000 something is the town money, right? The 20 million is the state money. 8 million, so yeah. I was thinking of the increase. Yeah, so.
I think the 1.3 might, if I'm reading this right, aren't we getting 1.1444, blah, 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 and then we're also getting 723? So we're
Yeah.
getting actually 1.9, give or take, 1.8?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Supposedly here, we're getting 1.144 million additional under operating allocation.
And then they
Additional
added,
723, is that 723 part of that one?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So she's just walking you through
Well,
what.
I'm going back to Anthony's question. I'm curious if that 1.3 is actually after the 506 is taken out.
that is how much the state's gonna give us with all those things that are in those sheets leading up to it.
Okay, so there has
That's
to
the
be,
increase, it's
so
not
there has
what
to be
they're
a
giving us,
decrease
it's the
somewhere.
increase.
because 1.1 and 723 is a lot more than 1.3.
So there is a decrease in the retirement line.
Yeah, there were a couple other decreases that I didn't point out.
Okay, so that
Yes,
was, okay.
yes, thank
okay.
you, sorry.
There are, yes.
Yes, I was pointing out the highlights, but there are some decreases in there, yes. So there was decrease in out-of-district placement, there was decrease in teacher retirement, so there were some decreases, thank you. So I mean, it's good news, bad news, right? I mean, it's good news, bad news, that's kind of how this works all the time, right? That the towns are determined by the state to have the ability to pay. We have to ask them to pay that, but we're getting that additional amount. So that's where we are with the ED 279.
Any questions?
Yeah, it's the 500,000, that's obviously split up between the three towns.
Yeah, so you can see what each town, so Greene, Leeds, and Turner, each have a different amount. And I think I can't remember if I did the math to sort of see what increase that is for each town. I feel like I did, but I don't have it in front of me.
I would have to go hunt
From
it.
last year.
Yeah.
It's probably in the draft revenue sheet we have, which I don't want to get into the specifics of that because we're still in progress. But each town, like you can see here, the percentage is based on sort of valuation of the town. Turner's worth the most. They pay the most. Leeds is worth the least. Leeds pays the least.
Sorry.
by
Oh,
valuation.
that's funny.
Smaller town, like it makes
I
sense,
thought
right?
reevaluation
The
big
two
time. We are
elementary
not
schools
worth
in
it.
Turner, so just a reminder, the two elementary schools in Turner together are 600 students. East has 200, Green has 330, 325. So, there's
I
a
just was chucking in when you said least valuable.
least valuable by the state's calculations. And
Okay.
yes, go ahead, Kyle.
Trying to find it again, but the state subsidy,
Yep,
how much of that is actually coming from the federal government subsidy?
this is all state.
All state?
The federal money is a separate pot of money that I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
But this is just state, this is just the budget that we put in front of the voters.
Thank you.
Yep. So, can you go back to PowerPoint?
This one or next one?
Yeah, next slide. So I just wanted to give you a visual. This is how this works. So this bar represents, this is last year's budget, right? Which I think was like 32 million something.
34.9.
34, okay, wow, mentally just dropped $2 million off. So this pot of money at the bottom was the state subsidy. This pot of money is the required local. This pot of money is that miscellaneous. We did carryover, some interest, some, state agency. The carryover is the biggest one. Last year we carried over 700,000 because we anticipated receiving some money from the state to support our Murder Murphy program at Green. So when you have whatever that total budget is, you plug in what those numbers you're getting, and this is what your gap is. This is what our gap is between how much we say we need to operate the schools and how much funding we're getting outside of where that last pot of money comes. This is that additional local. That's the amount. And that's why it doesn't always equal the percent increase of the budget. Okay. Okay, next. All right, so we've done state subsidy, required local. Now I want to talk about grants and uncertainties because we've been spending some time this week sort of trying to predict, which is just not a useful exercise these days, predict what might happen. So our two largest pots of money are for title grants. This past year we got $475,000. That was a $45,000 cut from the year before. So we're going to operate that we're going to receive a similar cut because we don't know. I think there's two competing budget bills between the two branches of Congress. One has a significant decrease, one has a small increase. How that's going to play out, we don't know. Okay? But we have 9 employees in that grant. So if that were to be cut in half, I think they're in Green and Leeds, and they are what's keeping those schools properly staffed. So a significant, that's not in the budget, it's not what we send to voters, but it is what we use to make sure those schools are properly staffed. The second, and all of our professional development, we have no professional development amount of money in our budget. It is all in title. So as we sort of are trying to work on what might be a worst case scenario, I think, we've tried to preserve some of that, preserve as many employees as possible, and preserve professional development money. That's where all the training came for reading, which I think is going to prove to be the best investment we've made because we've talked to other districts who didn't do that training and teachers just floundering. We've got an equally big lift for next year in math. So if you don't train people to use materials properly, they do the best they can, but everybody needs training, right? Everybody needs instruction in how to do that. So we're working at preserving some of that, but I think there's definitely questions about whether or not we can maintain all of those staff in the grant funding. The second large pot of money, even bigger than that, is for special ed, that's $600,000. There are currently 8 employees in that grant. What you will see when we go through the budget, and this has been true this is my 3rd budget, this has been true all along, the only thing in the special ed budget that will go to the voters are people. There's no training, no supplies, equipment that students might need. All of that comes from federal grant. all the professional development, all of that. So all you will see, there's no other lines. The only lines that are in there are tuition, like if teachers want to take classes, because that's what we do contractually, because they're teachers on a teacher contract. Everything else comes from there, including those employees. Yep.
Is that just how it works, or are we not allowed to put those employees that we're paying for out of the regular budget into that grant?
We could put, I mean, if the grant was more significant, we couldn't move teachers into there, but support any staff that provides supplemental service, school psychologists, that we could put in there we would take them out of the budget and put them in there if it was bigger, 100%. We can't put classroom teachers in there.
So that leads me back to the question I had last year, and we'll have again this year, is then, are we going to be able to see a line item of that special education grant?
We can show you what's in it.
Because, you know, the question is then, what are we using, you know, are there areas there that we could have requested less on and moved from our regular budget in?
Yeah, based on the work we're doing right now, no.
But
yes,
I think it'd be
absolutely.
appropriate for us to see it.
100%,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, because that is how we keep, I mean, that $600,000 is a significant investment. The total special ed budget is much bigger than that, but.
I will understand.
Yeah, but yeah, that is the only place we put supplies for students, equipment, professional development. This year, we had tried to hire a BCBA, behavior consultant professional. We were not able to hire one, but that position was in there. That was the hope, is we'd be able to hire a BCBA. So we haven't been able to do that. We're going to repurpose that to a position we know we can hire. So that work's already starting now. Like, let's not keep, if it's a position we really don't think we're going to be able to fill, what can we put in there that will be more useful and that will take some pressure off the budget?
Carrie?
Yep.
So we're anticipating, or I guess preparing, for potentially a loss of 45,000, because that's what happened last year. for that
That's
grant.
all we can do is make a guess based on last year.
Okay. Now, are these uncertain, like, we're just uncertain of the amount, but we've applied for these grants.
We don't have to apply. They automatically come to every state. Every state gets these two pots of money.
They're allocated.
Okay,
Yeah. So we don't have to apply for them.
okay. So what's uncertain is just how much they're going
Yes.
to be.
It's not, I mean, I guess the biggest uncertainty is that they'd be canceled, but I have a hard time believing. I mean, the special education is a federal law. The federal government has never fulfilled its obligation to fund properly what they said they would fund. This is a small portion of what the federal government said it would fund when they passed this law in the 70s.
Right.
But it is something that would radically impact every school district in every state across the country. Both of those grants would be, we were talking about it as superintendents, like I was checking with them, are you budgeting as if you're gonna kind of have close to the same amount? And we all sort of agreed, we don't have a choice but to do that, because to just assume it's not gonna be there is just that's too big of a crack, like a jolt to the system, because of the number of employees that we have and what else we use that for. So we are going to operate, I'm going to operate that the money will be there in some form close to what we've got now.
So this would be the extent of Department of Education grants and funding we get?
Those are the two biggest ones.
We have a number of other smaller
They're
grants.
just smaller, yeah.
In adult
But-
education, some.
Well, I just was curious, our number of smaller ones, but what is that? Does that number of smaller ones total up to like a couple $100,000?
Off the
No.
top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I don't think it's a couple $100,000.
I think actually,
And this is basically where we're just kind of, we're not sure where,
I put it together for you, didn't I?
you did. I'm-
where, for lack of a better term, Doge ends up.
I'm sorry.
Right now, this is uncertain, this is the area that we're uncertain of, because we're not sure what's going to happen in the Department of Education.
Right, that's the uncertainty, because we don't.
And none of this is the state stuff,
Nope.
but there is some issue potentially with state stuff.
Yeah,
that
they
could
haven't,
be
they haven't passed the
potential.
budget yet, so that, the ED 279 could change. They call this preliminary.
Oh, yeah.
So if the budget passes and it radically changes that number, then we'll get a new one, and we'll have to react to that, right? We have to change the budget according to what that is. So, Leeds has $42,000 because it was named a Tier 3 school. So that's a grant that we have. We have a $7,000 preventing student homelessness, $16,000 for adult ed, and then the $100,000 that's coming for the wastewater treatment plant. That's all federal money. But these two are like these two keep us operating. So those are significant. So I put that out there just because I'm not, like, during this process, some of that may change and we'll have to react to it. Or it may change after. We don't get the final number. When did you get it last year?
Mid-April.
Yeah, so.
And that's the
probably it's too
preliminary
late.
number. That's not even the final allocation.
When are these put together?
When or what?
When do we submit what these contain?
We don't have to submit anything. We get an allocation. They tell us how much you're gonna get.
But when do we decide how that allocation is broken down?
We do have to write the grant.
Oh,
So
yes,
once
sure.
we get is it okay if I talk?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Once we get the grant allocation, we write it during the summer. I write it during the summer with input, but like we have guidelines as to what it's going to look like. We are required to use the Title I funding, like there's specific reasons that you can use each one for. So when Carrie mentioned professional development, that all comes because there are 5 titles. We move all of our money that we get from 2 and 4 into 5, and then we also have to move some money into Title I to have enough. That's where we're paying for our employees with our 2 Title I schools. So I write the grant. It's basically looking like it's going to be salaries and benefits. We are required to set aside some funds for what's called a homeless project, and those are those are the requirements.
But title funds essentially is money targeted towards providing education for students who are low income.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have more low income students, you get more money. Fewer, you get less. And I think Rebecca has to do the same thing with special ed grant. You write projects, but you know how much money you're getting, so you develop your projects around that amount. Yep. So, just as preliminary, and these numbers are not solid, so don't take my word for it, but this is where we are right now as we continue to work on it. So, here are the drivers of our budget increases. So, salaries, the 3 contracts, we did some hard work in the last 2 years. We were not competitive in a lot of areas. We were having trouble staffing teachers and things like that, so that increase is $737,000. We have budgeted a 10% health insurance increase of $535,000. Last year we came in really, really low. We are not predicting that this year, but again, that number won't come first week of April, maybe, last week of March, maybe. I think we typically will find out what the highest possible number is. If you recall last year, I think that was 12%, so it was not a helpful number. And then we came in at like 1 or 2%.
So it helped at the end, because you got
it helped
nervous,
us,
and then
but
at the
like
end, you're
12%, what do you do with that, right?
1.8.
Special education is up $560,000, and I think, I mentioned this in PTB, we're monitoring the budget this year. I think in a couple areas we under budgeted. Main care seed in particular, so our share of main care, students who receive speech, PT, behavioral health support, things like that in the out-of-district placements, those schools get main care reimbursement for it, and the rates have gone up, which everybody needed, but that means our share of paying that. So it's like the copay on all of that has gone up dramatically. We did not budget appropriately for that this year. So we're working on the budget to sort of see where we're going to be. And facilities, $739,000. So those are like the biggest pots of money that we can see across the budget that are driving the issues that we're looking at. Yep.
Is the funding that we are receiving for the CPS, like taking over the 3 and 4-year-olds, is that state or federal funding?
That's state.
Okay. And that will be fully funded?
And that's what they say. And there's not, we did reduce did we reduce a school psychologist? we put 15% or 20% of that salary to CDS because we assumed that that person would be doing testing with those children. So we pulled that, and I think there was one other, I don't know if it was PT, I can't remember, we've written it down. 2 salaries, we reduced a percentage because we thought they would end up serving that population. But other than that, no impact on the budget.
Okay.
No, but that's going to be a requirement at some point, unless it changes in Augusta.
I doubt, once it goes to the public schools, we're the only state in the country that does not do pre-K special ed in
Yeah.
schools. So it's
So
never going
realistically,
back.
the funding of it, like any of this stuff, they will encourage you for the first year or two, and then it kind of, who knows, we'll give you a percentage.
We'll see,
Yeah,
we'll
pull
see,
it
we don't
right
know,
Pull it
right?
right out.
Yeah,
Now, and these are helping these kids at home. They're not any sort of in-school activity, correct?
no, they might, because we do have pre-K. So students may get services here in our schools. 4-year-olds, not the 3-year-olds. We don't serve 3-year-olds, so 4-year-olds, if they are identified, we actually had a couple families move into our area from out of state recently and sort of came to register their kids who had special ed needs in pre-K, and we're like, yeah, that's not how it works here. And they were stunned because of every other state. So starting next year, if that happens, then we'll be providing those services. So some of them will be may get their services in daycare. So it really is going to be kid by kid by kid. Yep, Alex?
The salaries number, is that all contractual increases, or are there any new salaries?
Those are our the 3 contracts, right? We pulled it from the teacher contract, the support staff contract, and ASME.
So there's no like new positions or anything like that?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
There are some new positions. I think we'll go through the details, but we are going to be adding 2 special ed teachers because of numbers. But I think the classroom teacher that's needed as TES is going to be a transferred position, so I don't think that's new. So I want to say the only real new teachers are 2 special ed teachers, but don't take
Now,
my
do
word
they
for
fall
it.
under special ed or salaries?
They'll fall under special ed, but we pulled out salaries. Like, it's a great question. We didn't double count the increase. We pulled out salaries here. Kevin and I just did that today, like, wait, no, that would be salaries.
Okay, so these numbers don't reflect the only increases within those warrants?
Right.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I just was
But
curious.
we're not double counting, like, that 560 does not also include all those salary increases. We pulled those out.
Okay.
Yeah, but so I understand
I actually
exactly.
think that 560 includes the 2 new teachers.
Oh, because it's brand new, because they're new positions.
brand
Yeah,
new.
so they would
But
be in
that
there
doesn't
because
include the salary increases.
of the other teachers, the people who already are here in Intex.
So your question got answered differently.
Yeah, I
throughout
know.
the conversation, but I think we landed in the right place.
So this is new, like that, yeah, that's new, yeah. So that's where we are right now. So obviously, we were still, massaging numbers will be massaging numbers tomorrow, so I just don't want to go on the record as saying anything.
It's written down.
I know, right? So like, I rounded all those numbers, like,
I don't see
was
anything
like,
about
yeah, I'm
guesstimations.
rounding those numbers, I know you're gonna be bothered by that, but I'm not, because I can't tell you that's exactly what those numbers are gonna be when you get your budget book next week, or in 2 weeks, because we've been working this every single day.
Well, we don't deal with change in the district, right?
I'm sorry.
We don't deal with decimals or anything, right?
No, no decimals. We don't do decimals in comments. That's a no.
All right, questions? I think that was it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Obviously, a lot more to come.
Oh, my
In a
goodness,
few
yes,
weeks.
yes.
In a few weeks.
So please feel free to send me questions, like, if, just to make sure that you feel like you're prepared for our conversation when we come back. But that's the $10,000 preview.
Okay. Thank you.
What's that? $35 million preview.
Okay.
It's not that quite high, don't be saying that number.
Last year.
No, it wasn't. It was 34.
34 something. We round up, right? Right, Ken?
It's like,
Always round up.
it's like when you buy gas, it's like, oh, it's
There's
$3.99 a gallon.
399.9.
0.9, right.
Or 9
All right. So as we talked about a few minutes ago, we're going to give Carrie a bit of a break here before she gets into capital facilities, and we'll add in our 2 policies that we pulled from the consent agenda. So We'll start with a motion for the first reading and acknowledgement of policy IJOC, school volunteers. Would anyone like to make that motion?
So moved. Second, whatever.
Peter's moving, Kyle will second. All those, well, no, we go to discussion now. I don't know, you gave a brief update, Jamie, on IJOC, school volunteers.
Yeah.
Maybe,
I just have a simple question on this.
oh, if you just want to ask your question, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I think. My question basically falls down to around one sentence, is the superintendent's decision is final, which generally I have no problem with, but there is no way for a volunteer to appeal that to the board?
Can you,
In
okay.
the
That
fourth
first
paragraph
page.
down, when a volunteer is denied being a volunteer, just part of me says, well, if a volunteer feels they want to be a volunteer or want to be a volunteer coach and is told no, I thought they could request one step above I thought that was part of our role.
So can
Please.
Not that I ever foresee
What-
doing it.
the only issues that have ever arisen around that in my short time doing this job have been background checks.
Well, I would assume, yes. And I think it'd be silly of them to appeal it. But I don't look at a particular situation, I look at the bigger picture and just, I don't know. I just was, it would fall under,
Wouldn't that fall under the complaint policy then? Somebody could complain that I've unfairly denied them the opportunity to volunteer.
so in that case, they do have an avenue to have appeal?
It would be the complaint.
Is that how that work? I'm just curious if they have that
Or
option.
file a complaint, I guess, for anything. Yeah.
I think it's analogous to they're kind of like staff. And so the superintendent handles the staffing. And we don't. So like we explicitly don't handle that. So I think that that's where that would land, and that we would be interfering with the superintendent's authority to administer the schools.
But yes, but our role with staff is the appealing board. A staff can go through the union on most any aspect or if they have an issue with,
If it weren't a complaint, you would only ever hear a grievance.
yeah.
Right.
So I'm looking at a grievance type situation. But no,
Did you want to add something here?
It's a question, I guess. A volunteer would fall under, in my opinion, the category of an at-will employee, and there is no grievance procedure for an at-will employee. That's all contractual, not at-will.
That's true.
No, I understand they're not part of the union. I just was given the opportunity for a person who got denied, who feels they should not have been denied to be a volunteer in the district, an opportunity to say why we're denied to them. But, so be it.
There was a similar issue, I think it was last year, where we were dealing with, maybe it was just last fall, where we were dealing with some Title IX issues, and it sort of outlined an appeal process. And in there, again, it was the superintendent's decision was final. Like the superintendent had to, if things could get bumped up to that level, you could say, no, I think I'm being unfairly treated here by this, this review board or whatever. And we actually, I think we got a legal opinion on why that was the case. And it was because, yeah, they're employees and you don't deal with them. So that's part of my reasoning for why it's analogous.
I didn't really have a motion in this one. I just had more of a question. So.
Good.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, when I read this policy, the paragraph that you're referencing is all prospective volunteers must complete a background check form, and the superintendent will review all background checks obtained and approve or deny the volunteer. The superintendent's decision is final. I think if there's something egregious on a criminal background check, we should probably trust our superintendent's decision to.
I don't know where I wasn't saying that we shouldn't, but I'm just saying we're all focusing solely on the background check.
Yeah, so
But there are other ways,
Yeah.
there are other reasons why a volunteer would be denied. Probably doesn't happen, but as Ashley mentioned once a long time ago, I'm not talking about this current superintendent. I'm talking about a policy that will probably be on for years and years to come until it's reevaluated again. So you never know the circumstance. So I am looking at it not with the current staff in question, and the bigger picture of just not the background check, because there's a whole variety of reasons why a person might be denied access to the school. They might have had issues with teachers. They might have had issues with the superintendent. They might have had issues for some variety of reasons that they were denied. And I was curious if there was an avenue for a person who had that way.
Yeah, I
100% agree. If a person is a pedophile, if a person has been proven that they run around, rob people, and have a full background check, then that's a, but I'm talking about the bigger picture, is all.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with Carrie that I think that would fall under the complaint policy, where they would bring a complaint to the board and then we would process it as a complaint.
So with
Well, I
that,
had no
Yeah.
actual change on it, I just
I
had
was
a
going to say,
question.
if there's an
No, no
amendment
motion.
to be made, okay.
No.
I think that's the avenue.
Yeah.
All those in favor of the, or acknowledgement of this first reading for this policy? All those in favor? That looks unanimous. All right. We'll move on to a motion to consider the policy committee's recommended first reading and acknowledgement of revised policy JKD, suspension and expulsion. Is that motion on the floor?
So moved.
Peter, a second by Kyle. Discussion on policy JKD. Go ahead, Peter.
Anybody guess?
I don't know.
Let's see, I would be looking to add a sentence prior to 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyways, under parental notification.
Which paragraph is that?
It's, I don't know, if
The
you looked at
student's
1, 2,
parents,
3,
legal
4,
guardian.
5, about the fifth paragraph down.
Okay.
The one I have a star on next to it, that one.
Gotcha.
And like I've said before, I'm always torn on this because I do feel that, anyways, I would like to see a sentence added to the beginning of that an attempt to notify the parent or legal guardian of the student shall be made prior to the suspension conversation with the student. If the parents are not able to be reached, then continue with the current sentence.
Okay, so you're going to move.
I would make the motion to add a sentence to the beginning of that small paragraph sentence that says, an attempt to notify the parent or legal guardian of the student shall be made prior to the suspension conversation with the student. If the parents are not able to be reached, then continue with that current sentence that is there. Again, well, we'll see if there's a second
Yeah, is
before
there
I
a
go into my
second?
thought
Is
process.
there a second on that? Alex? All right, so let's discuss this specifically. I just want to make sure we've got it recorded. Teresa, do you feel you have that written down?
I should be able to read my handwriting.
All right, I think it's worth, I know we just heard it a couple times, let's read it one more time.
An attempt to notify the parent, legal guardian of the student shall be made prior to the suspension conversation with the student. If the parents are not reached, then,
Okay.
I guess what Peter is suggesting that would say they shall be notified as soon as practicable.
Yeah, then the current sentence that sits there, which is,
Then we-
would then fall into place.
Any other discussion around this amendment specifically?
Just my reasoning behind it. I am not looking to cause significant issues with the protection of the school, safety of the school, and so forth. I just, looking at it from the outside, don't see where, I believe that it doesn't necessarily have to be the principal or vice principal who makes the initial call. I think it could be designated to a designee in the office. And that before you go into the detail with a student about a suspension. We're just talking in-school suspensions, of course, or of-school, or overall suspensions. That the parent of that student ought to at least try to be notified so that they know that they want to be involved at that point. Again, more specifically, before the student has their opportunity to give their side, in case the parents feel that they need to be involved to help that student. Because again, we're talking about a student who is potentially heading down a route of getting into serious trouble. This is the very first, most minor step, but a suspension with the discussion could turn into an expulsion if it is done in the improper way, and I want to make sure that the student is protected as much as possible.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Peter. I'm curious if there are initial thoughts by the superintendent or maybe the principal or maybe Mr. Shaw. Also don't know if you want to digest this a bit before even responding.
Well, I feel like we had this conversation at least a year ago. I mean, it feels like similar, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think I'll ask Evan to weigh in, but my initial thoughts that I remember from that discussion is, one, if a student's in trouble, we're not having anybody but the administration contact them. We're not going to ask secretaries to call parents and say that your student has done X, Y, Z. Like, that is just, that's way above their pay grade, and that's not best practice. If we have serious issues to talk with families about, we're going to do that with the people who are qualified to do that. And for example, Leeds has one administrator. There is no other person to do that. So I think that's a really important thing to remember. And for us to maintain order in schools, like a lot of the conversation we've had in the last 3 years has been about reducing behavior, making sure that teachers and staff are doing all they should be doing to put kids in the best position as possible to be successful, but also holding kids accountable when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I think this, and I understand your reasoning, Peter. I absolutely understand that. I think this makes our schools less safe by forcing administrators to pause their work, to not continue an investigation that could be exceptionally timely, that may make things less safe if they're not engaging in that investigation right at that minute. If they have to stop and make phone calls with cell phones and everything like that, I will tell you that the calculus of an administrator is different than it was when we were all in school. If you're going to do an investigation, you have to think about how you're going to make sure that communication doesn't happen between students who may be witnesses, who then will start collaborating with it. Like, it is a very complex scenario. So adding in more to that complexity, I think absolutely will make our schools less safe. But I will let Evan speak to that as well.
So yeah, it has been about a year that we talked about this. I can't remember exactly, but I think we were here last time we talked about it. And I didn't bring all my stuff with me, so I apologize for that. But this policy in particular, not that other ones aren't, but this policy in particular is written in such a way that it's reflective of both federal and state statute and case law. And the reason that it's written the way it is so that we are obligated to follow that case law. And the reason that the order of operations in which they happen, I'm just going to, I hear you when you said earlier this is about not people who are here now. I get that necessarily, but the fact of the matter is we're the ones that have to implement it. And I'm struggling with how to phrase it. We're constantly trying to communicate with parents. We're not trying to keep parents out of the loop. Like, that's not happening. And I can't imagine a situation in which it would. So I'm struggling to find the benefit of making our policy more restrictive than what federal and state statute allows us to do.
Anyone else?
I'll just respond real
Yeah.
quick to those. I completely understand. I heard last year only the administration or immediate administration being able to make the calls, and I understand that. And to me, I can't imagine, unless you got into an in-depth conversation with the parent, it being more than a 3 to 5 minute break in the whole experience. How I picture the situation is Johnny or Jane has done something stupid. You've brought them to the office or wherever they're located, and they're sitting in the office away from the student body, no longer causing the harm that they were afraid they're going to cause. And then before you go in and have the conversation with them, you make a phone call to home saying, I'm about to have a conversation with your child in regards to this situation. And they're going to explain the situation to me. And then, depending upon, any good parent will say, good, do what you need to do. But
That's a bold statement, sir.
I know. I'm very well aware of that. But still, it is the parent's right at that point to be involved, to make sure that their child that they're responsible for is, I think it's their right to know what's going on. At which point, so I'm not seeing the potential, the child is out of I'm not saying that the child has to stay in the student body. The child is isolated, and before you go in and have that one-on-one with them, I'm getting a little bit confused on how that 3 to 5 minute hiatus there where they're sitting is going to cause that much of a safety concern in the district, in the school. And as for the legal aspect, you're absolutely right, but there's no reason why we can't go one step further and say that there's nothing that, I would see nothing in the law that would say that we can't do this. We're following the law with what's here, but I'm positive that there's nothing in the law that says that we're forbidden to notify the parents in this particular case.
I'm not sure who was first, either Ashley or Anthony. Ashley, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, because what you're describing and what the amendment you're making seem to me like two different things. So the way I read what you wrote to add into the policy is that as soon as a decision has been made to suspend the student, you want the parent notified before the student is notified that you're being suspended. But you're making it sound like you want the parent notified before the investigation is started. So like Evan couldn't have a conversation with a student even before the decision to suspend has happened based on what you just said. But the way the policy reads is all that can still take place, but before the student is notified of what's happening, mom and dad are called. So which?
My biggest concern and wording would take out of it is before, and Evan and I have had this conversation, and I'm not going to go into details about the past, but before that student is isolated in a room with an authoritative figure and nobody else and questioned, the parent should know about it. That is where my concern lies. And I'm not going to go into why I have this concern, but that is where my concern lies. Is before that student is isolated in the room with a figure that we have as an authoritative figure, questioning them, the parent ought to know that because a suspension can lead to an expulsion, which we do know can lead to a bigger issue in that child's future. Not very often, if ever happens, but it is a potential. And I just think the parents ought to know because we're responsible for that child.
Did that clarify where you were at?
And I'm not sure how the wording should be, but that's my concern.
So this is only specifically in instances of suspension. So you could potentially be going down an investigation and end up not being a suspension. So that's where I'm just having trouble with the language versus what you're describing. Because I could picture, I had this question in high school without my parents, and I wasn't suspended. But this is very specific to only if it leads to a suspension, not just any investigation that may not. So it just sounds like two different things.
Anthony, go ahead.
I'm curious, what would change for the student? It seems to me, let's say the parent does get called right away. Let's just imagine that we adopt this. Parent gets called. Are any students whose parents are called not going to still get suspended?
Well, I think when we talked about this last year, I think that phone call is happening, as you're describing it, Peter, I think, before we actually know, if it's just when we've got a kid who we think has done something, but we haven't actually finish the investigation, we're calling. So we don't even know the kid's gonna get suspended, right? So
Well, I'm going with the wording that Peter gave us is an attempt to notify the parent will be made prior to notification of the student. I think that notification is, kid, you're getting suspended, right? Am I misunderstanding that?
It's funny that you say that, because I think, feeling the same thing, but realizing after a few more conversations that we were talking about something else in some ways. Because I think that what you just described, Peter, what you're looking for in having, before the student gets in that setting for the investigation, you want the parent notified. But I don't think that's what we're talking about for language here. I think the language here is just talking about the notification of them being suspended. So this wouldn't necessarily prevent, the insertion of that language here, at least what I'm understanding, would not prevent the staff from investigating the student in a room. At least not the way I read it, and I think that's what Anthony's agreeing with me.
I don't have it in front of me anymore, but the wording would,
Yeah.
and I am not beholden to any sort of words in the slightest. An attempt to notify the parent, legal guardian of the student shall be made prior to the suspension conversation. For lack of a better term, I call this section the suspension conversation, which letter C is my bigger concern.
Okay.
And that's part of I don't know how else to explain that area, but that is the conversation that the administration would have with the student. So my wording was, she'll be made prior to the suspension conversation. And that, letter C of that is they should be given the opportunity to present his or her version of the incident. Which is when they might feel they need a little bit of parental guidance.
Yeah. All right, well, I think I'm clear on your intent. I'm not so sure the language we're currently talking about addresses that intent the way it's currently written. So we might need to adjust that if we're going to move forward to match that intent. I don't know if, or not, I guess. Is anyone else? Yeah, Alex.
Just a question. Is there a separate policy that dictates how investigations go? So would it be more appropriate in there?
We reviewed that policy last year and had a similar
that's when we had
conversation.
this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is,
Yeah.
It's
And there's
cross-referenced.
another policy we're supposed to evaluate at some point, but we haven't got around to it. I can't remember what it was, but it was moved on from that one.
I think the one that you are talking about is the search and seizure policy. Is that what you're talking about? I remember that being discussed at that same time, if my memory serves.
But anyways,
Yeah.
that was my concern. Like I said, if anybody's surprised, that's where.
No, I'm not surprised because we have talked about it before, right? And I'm not sure my position has really changed on it. I'm very sympathetic to students, having their parents with them in times of stress, especially the minors. But I'm also very sympathetic to our administrators trying to keep things straight in our schools. And I really have a hard time adding some of those restrictions that we're talking about to those conversations. I wouldn't want anyone to get tripped up, right? And I would not want to see it'd be harder for Evan to get to the bottom of something that's going on in the school. So it's hard for me. I'm a little torn, but I'm leaning towards the administration on this.
So a couple of things. I think that if we were to utilize that language, I think it should probably be in the ABC area, right? It would be a lot cleaner that way. But, and because I'm not suggesting that, that we do adopt that. If there's been an awful lot of news about really troublesome behavior in public schools, videos of basically like riots, right? Kids hitting each other with sticks in school. I think it's pretty clear in situations like that, that these kids are gonna get suspended. And to add this, this step at a time when there's a lot of pretty serious work that has to get done very quickly, I think, you know, the law requires that the parents be notified as soon as possible. I think that call is probably going to be made really fast. But if it has to be made before you can talk to the students, in a situation like these melees that I've seen in Lewiston, it's not far from here. I don't know how, I just don't know how that would work. And I respect the idea that we want to have the parents involved, but I think, I mean, in cases like that, it's so clear cut. It's going to introduce an unnecessary step that could actually just jeopardize all of the kids who aren't acting up. They need attention too, and this is going to distract from all of that. So I think, I mean, I'd be willing to entertain thinking about if there's some other way that we can add something, but I don't know.
So, yeah, along that light, let's act on the current amendment on the floor, not the motion, right? Let's just act on the current amendment about this language. And if, I'm saying that because I don't think it necessarily addresses your concern.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But if there's alternate proposed language, we can talk about that here after. So all those in favor of the current amendment on the floor?
That'd be me.
Peter, okay. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, did you record that? Effectively, it does not pass. So we're back to baseline discussion about the motion on the floor for the first reading and acknowledgement here of the policy. And again, this is just the first reading, right? So this is going to come back to us again for another conversation. But I don't know. You have another way of saying that? Okay. Anyone have any more to add on this policy at this point? Okay. All those in favor of acknowledging first reading? Opposed? Here. Okay.
Peter's motion.
Can you hand the piece of paper back?
I'll just take a picture of it and then I get back to it.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move on now to item 10.3, which is a presentation by Superintendent Ned on capital facilities planning.
Do you have this?
You have to share it.
Okay.
And I think while you're sharing that, Kyle, do you want to highlight what you've printed off?
Yeah,
for us here
Kyle,
today?
please.
Oh, you want me to?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna need one of those and. Any extras of these?
We'll see.
Okay.
Give you extra of
And then any extras of the other one?
I don't think so.
Do you have any extra copies of that?
No, there was only two, I went that way.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for you. Chop, chop. This is.
And you already shared on the back plan.
Okay. All good times. Are you gonna talk about your big
I'll do a quick little.
Yeah, go.
So if you guys, I know there's some new people, but EEI was a group that we chose to do a feasibility study to look at our schools, and there was, prior to that was Siemens, and EEI was a better fit for the whole facilities. We have 6 schools, and each school was meticulously gone through. If you guys go through it and comb through, you'll see that on page 5 you have the square footages of all the schools, so it just kind of gives you the idea of how large these properties are, and the makeup of them. scattered across. So there's a lot of different things that they've highlighted, all the way from ramps to hand railings to leaking doors. But then there's some major items that they were finding, which on page 8 you have the Leavitt Area High School roof evaluation, and it was showing rot, showing a lot of deterioration, and that roof isn't, I forget how old it was, but it's not as old, but there was some inferior installation going on with there, so that is we definitely need to address it before we lose it. And I know that in our talks that there's already been 2 schools. I know one was like South Paris, that had a shutdown and actually put the kids into remote learning because they've failed to stay up with the maintenance. So obviously we don't want that to happen. And if you keep going through, there's a lot of other items, and some water drainage issues, and I know Dave had talked about there's some leaking pipes that need to be addressed in the ceilings. Most of the stuff in this we're able to handle in-house with some of the maintenance stuff to take care of, which Dave and his team has done a great job on trying to get ahead of it. So a lot of these items, and I don't know how many of these items have already been taken off this list, but we have prioritized, and Carrie will get into it, that some of the items that we're focusing on out of all this, we're going to take and look at that cost and take those priorities, and then other ones not so much. So we've kind of created a priority list, and I believe there's, she'll have it, but there's, 10? Yeah, pretty close, 10 items that are major items that we definitely have to address. So other than that, that's pretty much it. So.
Mind if I add a little bit too?
Go for it.
And just my own time on PTV and some of the history as well here. I mean, when Carrie first came on, we had a new business manager. There was a lot of disruption through the pandemic. There was a bunch of emergency projects, right? And I think there was a real feeling. There was a memorandum that had, a list of things that had kind of been carried forward through for a few years, but there was a real feeling that do we really have our hands around everything going on in all of our buildings? And it was not a real good feeling that we did. And so this study and this work with the EEI was really to do that. Let's get our hands around every school building. What are the needs? And let's start thinking about planning as we move forward, rather than just being reactive to emergencies. And here we are. So it's been a long time coming, many years, actually, at least a couple of years for this.
Yeah.
Well, we've been here over just two and a half now, so.
Yeah, so I mean,
Lots happening.
it's been a few years for this to get prepared and to get to us. So it's a big deal, I think, to be here now.
Yeah, and to get to this administration to have a better understanding of the facilities, because we have so many new people between Dave and Carrie and Gabby coming in. So like having an idea of actually what everything is, because it wasn't really that organized, I guess, and not really prioritized that great. So.
So to get ready for this, sort of with Gabby and Dave went into the archives, because some stuff was getting done prior to our arrival, but we had to get caught up to it and sort of remind ourselves. There's people talk about the Siemens Phase 1, Siemens Phase 2, so that's all prior to our arrival. So I wanted to come back and just sort of remind, or not even remind, for me some of it was learned, and it's not been something that we talked about at PTV, sort of what got done prior to our arrival, and then sort of where are we now. So Siemens Phase 1, so between 2016 and 2020, the district engaged with Siemens to do a bunch of projects related to energy efficiency and things like that. Siemens has done that across the state in various ways. So the Phase 1 projects were completed in 2016. It was a $4.9 million loan that matures in 2032. in our budget, that is a $400,000 payment. And there was some lighting control work done. That was when they automated all this, and Dave is gonna jump in at any point that I start not making sense. Automated all the heating across all the district buildings. So it could be managed. We did some refrigerator, freezer controls, the boiler replacement at Leeds, cooling in offices and central office, some window repairs at the high school, some were window replacements at the middle school, TES and LCS, and the wood chip boiler, this was the major project, the wood chip boiler here connected to the middle school and TES. And that's probably the bulk of the work, was getting those buildings all on there. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the piping from Levitt Area High School to
Yeah.
Trip Middle and TES. That was a big project.
Phase 2, much smaller, 1.58 million, and that's a bond. That was a bond that the district must have gone out for. So that's a $104,000 annual payment that's in our budget, and that is the chiller here that was managing the air conditioning, the chiller and pump replacement, the wood chip bunker installation that we're talking about is now problematic because the size of the trucks have changed from what that work was done in 2020. We did some unit ventilator replacement at TES and some asbestos removal and some kitchen equipment is what we've got on the list. So those two were done. Those we're currently paying for, that work. Okay? So 2020, we got a revolving renovation fund loan for Leeds to improve ventilation in classrooms. And this is the wing that we're not working on this summer. So the wing we're working on didn't get this work. So ventilation, and that's why we're not doing it, because they just had their ventilators replaced. And ADA compliance needs. So all of that was a Leeds, that revolving renovation fund grant. Essentially, we pay the share of what we currently pay in subsidy. So I think I said to you, the state balances, sort of you're a high receiver, the state subsidy is about 70%, we pay 30%. When you get a revolving renovation fund loan, that's the percentage that they work on. So we're paying back 36% of that. So that annual payment it's a smaller loan and it's a smaller payment. So that is on those renovations at Leeds. So the project that we're working on was for Leeds. It had other parts to it, but the project that we are going to be doing this summer is the other half of Leeds is getting the new ventilators, and they're going to get dehumidification because that was the wing that was like 90 degrees. That had some of the hottest. So, and in amongst all of that is the wastewater treatment plant that I'm thinking started in 2018. That was the very first thing. Dave and I, the very first time we ever had a meeting, sitting down in July with Jan and those guys, and like, wait, what? We're doing what? And who's what? What is that? I don't even know what that thing is. So there's been a huge learning curve. So we have a bond for that. We had to get an extension on that bond. It was a special Maine law, but we got it because the project has taken so long. So it's a $1.6 million bond that will mature once we start paying on it in 2049 with an estimated annual payment of about $92,000. So that is the background. So since 2022, that's when I arrived, that's when Gabby arrived, actually that's when Dave arrived. And I just, before we move forward, because I think we've gotten a lot done in a short amount of time, and I think we have the investment that has been made in the budget in the last 2 years has stabilized facilities. I mean, we have a long list, but creating head custodians, for example, that is checking things off in schools before they turn into bigger things, right? Because now we've got people who have responsibility. We've got stabilization in terms of the leadership. We churned through two different people before Dave came. Dave's first year, hard to get a lot done because he was also the transportation director, if you remember. So an investment in splitting those positions cost money, but has stabilized both departments. It has done exactly what we hoped it would do. Both departments are now stabilized and making progress. So good investments that have proven to be sort of making us be able to move forward. So we did an RFQ. EEI was selected. They've done this beast of a document to look at every single thing within the district that we need to work on. The first project is either parts of it are completed and we still have more to do. So the green boiler and the dehumidification ventilation units that needed to be replaced, they now have dehumidification at green for that second floor. The second floor was actually hotter than Leeds, I think. Was sort of that was the hottest place in the district. Lighting upgrades in every single building all across the district. And then Leeds this summer, are we still in process of doing the phase 3 electricity?
So Leeds will be completed. Green, we just have the boilers done. So they're gonna do the dehumidification.
Oh, they haven't done the ventilation yet, that's
Right.
next summer, right?
Yeah, that's
okay.
sitting at Cody Crane right now.
So next summer will be the ventilation at Green and Leeds?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we are making good progress there. And so one loan that we did pay off was the huge renovation of Green and the middle school. That was $273,000 a year. That was paid off, so that is not in the budget anymore. So that is done. So we sat down and have shared this with PTB to sort of take this big book and figure out how do we think we can do these things? What in that big book do we think really is a priority we got to do, and how are we going to pay for it? So that's that 4-colored column thing that I've got for you. So things that were in that book, it's only 2 things, but we should celebrate the victories. There were 2 paving projects that were really problematic. And last year, at the very end, we were able to add these back into the budget when our insurance came in so low, we added these back in. We felt comfortable sort of doing that, so that was a last minute increase, so we got those done last summer by the skin of our teeth. So the next column are projects completed in a multi-year budget. We think, depending on how each budget year goes, we think we can pick away at these just through the budget process. We may find that that's not possible as we look at each budget and look at increases, right? But what we think, so we've got this crew here, that's all in the budget because it's going to be a loan repayment. The wastewater treatment plant is going to be a loan repayment. The rest of that, we think we can pick away at over the next several years. A couple projects at TPS, projects at the high school. If we don't move transportation, we've got to deal with the parking here at the high school. We've got windows everywhere. Flashing lights at TPS, those are long overdue for traffic. Yep.
When you say pick away at, I think using the windows as an example might be a good way to illustrate what picking away at means versus not picking away at.
So what we have done, the current budget has $100,000 in there. It needs to be annual because replacing one window, talk about the pricing of the windows.
So for instance, the windows behind you, the ones that are double mold or triple mold, the double mold is $8,800, the triple mold is $10,900. So you can probably get 8 or 9 windows for $100,000 like that. And in this high school, I went through the whole first floor this morning. I totaled up, we have blue tape on the windows that need to be replaced. It totaled up to $267,000 just for the first floor.
Dave, can you just explain what double mold and triple mold?
Yeah, so if you look behind Peter, those 2 windows together, that would be a double mold, double hung window. And then the ones behind Teresa, those are 3 windows together. That would be a triple mold together.
So when Carrie says pick away at, that means put money in the budget to deal with a few windows every year.
Correct.
Rather than make it one huge window replacement across the whole school type of project that we borrow money for.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
And these are recommendations. I mean, if we could make different decisions, but this is sort of where we're sitting right now. So we have $100,000 in the budget that we'll present next week, in 2 weeks. That is the beginning of this multi-year, we need to deal with the windows that need to be replaced here. Because when the wind blows, the curtains move. The fire retardant curtains.
That is correct. I would say we're probably short on blue tape.
Yeah, yeah.
Keeps fresh air.
Blue
It's ventilation.
Yeah, aren't we paying more for ventilation?
I was gonna say, we're paying big bucks for ventilation. Seems like we're
So-
working against ourselves.
There will be items on here that we can say, but for example, the TPS facade, we had put the full amount in there, we're gonna do part of that. So we've made some decisions leading into what's coming, but again, those are just gonna be the recommendations for you all to look at and decide what you wanna do.
I realize that this will all go in detail later, but I do have, because this is a new one to me. What is the flashing lights at TPS? Where are we talking?
Yep, they're the school zone, you know, when they flash, the ones that are down by the height, for the high school,
15
middle
mile an
school.
hour driving by,
Yeah,
lights that flash. Some schools don't have flashing lights, some schools just have a sign that says 15 miles an hour.
So would this be on
Cobb Road.
Cobb Road?
Yeah, it's the only complaint I get consistently from
People going too
citizens
fast?
and parents about traffic on that road when school's in session. This is long overdue. It's a problem.
I
People
agree.
don't drive appropriately. Jamie, you drive, I hope you drive, right? Yeah.
I run on that road and I drive and I've been one of those complaints, so.
Right, yeah, 100%. Like, it's long overdue. And then the flashing lights at Turner's, at the central office, that's the crosswalk. I have a perfect view of that crosswalk. And from the very first summer I was here, when kids came back for preseason, I was like, wait, it's not even painted. And kids, you know, they all stream down to Jimmy's and then they go back, they need some lunch, whatever. And so I worked with Kurt, he was great. I was like, we gotta get that thing painted. Like, kids are crossing all the time. And so now it's getting painted every summer, because I remind him, like, don't forget, get it painted. But I use that crosswalk all the time when I walk up to middle school, high school. Nobody ever stops there. Kids are crossing, there's cars. I watch them out the window. We have to have flashing lights there. It's just not safe. People don't see them. They don't see me when I'm crossing there. So we need to put, those are in the budget. Like, those are not items that we can put off. We need some other cameras and stuff. We're gonna try for a COPS grant, assuming those are still gonna be there. But that is something that I don't think is worth risking a COPS grant. Like, if we don't get the grant, we can't do it. Those are important enough, they have to stay in there. So this is what we think over time we can pay for. We can update you as to like what we've actually put in the budget. Those are a couple things that I know are there and things that we are not. We think a reserve account with the money that we've been putting in are going to be able to help us deal with this. So one, we already know the wastewater treatment plant. We've approved using reserve funds for that. We are pretty confident. We know we'll have money for the roof replacement at Leeds through the reserve account. We think over time we will have money for the elevator. That diesel tank is replaced, is there, but again, we've put the pause on that to make sure that we can take care of other things, because the TPS water has now jumped up above. Because that water situation now has a timeline to it. The state has said you've got to resolve this permanently by June 30th. So that's now jumped the road. So the water, once we get a number on that, we'll know where we are in the reserve account, how much we need to make sure we put into that, to also make sure we've got money for something else that may happen that we don't plan for. And then the final is the list of things that without additional funding, either a bond, a loan, whatever, we're not going to be able to take care of. TMS, GCS, and LCS, all their water is like ancient.
Yeah, the tanks, the holding tanks, are roughly 58, 59 years old at Leeds and at Trenton Middle. The ones at Green, I believe, are probably 1970, but yeah, and so for instance, when we had a new well pump, we put in it at Trenton Middle because we lost our well pump. The tank itself, once they got down to pretty much basically dry, when we pumped in the water, it actually had, kind of created an unsettled water. So we drank the bottled water for at least a month there as we tested it, just because of what could be on the inside of those tanks. They're older, they're hydrostatic tanks, so they need to be replaced.
And water shuts down our buildings. When we don't have power, the issue isn't the power, the issue is the water. So both the high school and the middle school this year had remote learning days because of lack of water. So this is risky, not dealing with those.
Speaking of, I don't see generators on here.
Nope.
Did we just X them completely at this point?
Well, no, we've got a grant to FEMA. We're waiting for that grant to come through for the high school. I think we've put that in place and then see where we are. What we learned about that is they're not quite as expensive as we thought, and the fact that Leeds is getting phase 3 power, I think simplifies that. So it's possible that at some point, but again, that would be like, if we put a generator in instead of replacing them, like, then it's just, it's prioritizing.
Phase 3 pound leads, they should have thrown in the generator.
I know, right? The roof at the high school, rough cost of $2 million. The ventilation system at the middle school, $2.8. This district's been talking a long time about the cafeteria and the lack of space there and the issues that causes, both in the kitchen and for students. Boiler at TPS, whether or not we do a new transportation facility, that's still in conversation. Central office has a lot of things that it needs. We don't need to, the money goes to schools, but central office is I think to say that ADA compliance issues is sort of an understatement of the universe, and the boiler is, I don't know, 1 billion years old. So at some point, we've got to deal with that. And then we got to deal with the field situation, how we want to handle that in terms of that. So, and whether or not we do an expansion plan, all those things. So those are things that, at some point, those are larger projects that we need to prioritize and then decide how we want to pay for them. So that is where we are.
I have just a couple points I want to make about this too that may not be obvious to everyone that hasn't been in this a lot. And that is that this actually, and I don't remember the total number, what was it?
I do not know, but it was over 30 million.
Yeah, I was going to say 30 to 40 million. Yeah. So this is outlining like a lot of work that our schools need.
Yeah.
This is just the things that really need to be done.
Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't a wish list here. This is a quarter of what's in this book as far as what was highlighted by EEI.
Well, and it represents prioritization, so there's things in there like, that's not, like, we can move that to the bottom of the list, so, and it's not going to create a crisis, but.
And similarly, I think we're going to find when we get into budgeting that the maintenance budget's up. Like, when we compare this year to last year, maintenance budget's up. The reason why it's up is because of that blue column. It's because there's been a conscious decision to start working in some of these projects a little bit at a time now, eat away at it, like you said, rather than pull them out entirely and make them large, separate, bonded projects. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight those 2 points because as you're seeing these 3 different pots shift around, and I would say there's a fourth column, which was this whole report, which is not, we're talking about doing everything in this report. So.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that's a good point to make to the public as well, like, so that our community understands that our budget is up, but it's up, we're prioritizing what this is. Like, these aren't, like you said, we're just gonna go ahead and do it. This is just the mandatory repairs that have to be made.
Right.
And I think Anthony mentioned at one of our meetings, but like us tapping into the reserve fund, using that to do it, we're not borrowing money and obviously paying interest, which is going to cost us actually more money in the long run. So it's.
And I think going back to that, as we're communicating in the community about this, because last year was a lot of conversation about the reserve fund, how big it is, and why we're not returning it to the community. And I think at that point last year, we weren't able to be this articulate about what we needed that money for, but now we are able to articulate that. And like, these are very specific projects that I think makes it a lot easier to tell people why we're not returning the money and why that's good for the community, because we're not borrowing, we're not paying on interest, and we're taking care of things without even adding, this doesn't even add to the budget, right? This is taking from the reserve that's been high for a couple of years without really a plan. But this feels like a plan.
And TPS is such a great example of why we need that money to be nimble, because TPS was something that wasn't on our radar screen when we did our budget last year, TPS water, and it failed, and the state put a mandate on us to get it done by June. Like, where else would we come up with money to deal with an emergency like that or a massive project if we didn't have that reserve fund? So it's, yeah, I'm very supportive of that strategy.
So I think that will be a challenge, though, in communicating, and I think you all are in the community, like, I think that's gonna be a big challenge, communicating that and helping people to understand that. Because I know I got lots of comments, as I know some of you did in the community, about why aren't you returning that money? It was said in some of our meetings, and so I think, I feel much more confident, instead of saying like, we're gonna need it, it's, we do need it, and this is what we're spending it on. I think that has, I think us getting our hands around this is really gonna be helpful for that. Yep.
In regards to this guy, is there more to the field information than this?
One of the reasons why it's a question mark up there, they kind of, I don't know how you want to classify it, but they really focus very well on the buildings
Yeah.
in this report. And kind of the external infrastructure, like the fields and, I guess it's really
Bleachers,
just,
clubhouses,
Yeah.
all that stuff is kind of.
it was kind of like they're still working on it, right?
Yeah.
And,
Okay, so they're not done.
no,
Okay, because I know we have problems with certain fields and drainage and so forth.
and we don't
And
have
I'm
firm
seeing
recommend
that,
now.
so this is not, because all I see is the map. that
And
says-
that's why that's a question mark up
Yeah,
there
no,
too.
I understand, because
Yeah.
at 8 million is nowhere near right, because that field
Right.
one's can be big if we ever chose to. The other thing was was it this group? I can't remember now, I get confused. That they were doing also a survey of all the schools in space. That was last year we talked about?
We have talked about that. And I don't know if it got incorporated here or not.
Apparently not.
Yeah, but we
You
were,
mean like,
we were talking about
You-
potential growth of the student body,
oh,
space in the schools, availability of space, and whether or not we need to be thinking about expansion of the buildings, kind of.
Or more reallocation of departments or classrooms or this or
Right.
that.
I mean, we have been doing that in the budget. We have reallocated classroom teachers from Green to Turner in the last 2 budgets that I've been here, because the population has, where that
But we're
population.
talking more of like space or like if certain like programs should move from this.
That was the other thing, yeah, was,
The kitchen at the middle school, yeah, that's part of the cafeteria at middle school. That kitchen is severely undersized, as is the cafeteria for the population we have there. And we did spend some time on Leeds, seeing if we could expand to the basement to grow some space there. It was kind of a waste of time because it had been asked before, and I don't know, Dave, you want, it felt like we were just, I don't know, it was a stupid little project. I mean, it had lots of potential, and then we kind of got the kibosh.
Yeah, once we kind of applied to use the space downstairs, but ADA stuff as far as like sprinklers would have to be implemented there. And then actually a guy called me back a month later and said that we had tried that as a district like 10 years ago.
So the fire marshal.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you had done some work down there, not major, but like done some work, and if the guy had just told us, we would have stopped.
Yeah.
So we can have staff down there, there's a staff room, but we can't have students in the basement.
it's an interesting little trip down there too, because you go down there and you realize there used to be classroom space down there.
100%.
This was,
People say, that was my room, and it's in a basement, it's,
right,
yeah,
but it's not
no,
usable anymore.
not what we would
Don't pass the
expect
basement.
these days. What's that?
My office is in there.
Not Leeds basement.
You have a cave.
We have a cave.
You
All
have a
right, so
cave.
that is where we are for capital planning. More to come in discussions in the budget.
Oh, I didn't see the tennis court.
It is not on
That
the
is
list
gone.
here. It's not on the list. If you would like to lead that charge, you stand in
That is
front.
just,
I learned how to play tennis on those courts.
That's
and
why
they're
there's a
gone.
question
I did
mark
too.
still next to athletic fields and.
full life sports.
All
Karen,
right.
your presentation for the last time?
Yeah, but I'm just going to hand it out, so you don't need to do that. Where is it?
All right. So that's item 10.3. We're going to move on to item 10.4, which is another presentation by Carrie, which is an update on the district's strategic plan.
Yeah, this one will be quick, because really what I've done in working with Teresa to sort of give you an update of where we are, and we had put this on the board agenda right before budget season, because this is supposed to be what's moving us forward, right? So it's a good time to sort of be reminded of what the goals have been, what we said we were going to work on this year, and where we are. So what I've done is when you look at each part of this plan, highlighted in green the things that are like, we are on it, we've been doing it. Things that in yellow are still in implementation, working on it, but I wouldn't say like we're on it, right? I would say it's a work in progress. So, hang on, did all the pages get copied? All of a sudden it went, oh, mine's backward. Okay, I'm good. So in the very first section is around climate and support. Objective 1 was about building the multi-tiered systems of support. You've gotten a great presentation from Teresa and Rebecca on the work.
I don't think it's in the right order.
Okay, then I'm gonna go show it on the computer.
Yeah, we're missing. I see it goes 7, 9.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
7,
think it's
9.
Yeah.
I'm
We have
sorry.
the odd numbered ones. Here, I'll
I'm
collect
sorry.
them. Send it to
All the bad information's on the email.
Unless you just
You
want
gotta
to
press
read
that two-sided copy
Kyle
button.
doesn't want to give this up.
Get both.
This happened last year at one of our meetings.
It's my fire starter.
So somebody doesn't have all the
All
edicts?
right, I just shared it with you.
No,
no, I think
It's
that-
a bit bigger.
No, when it was run off, it was just.
Yeah, I have all the pages, but you guys don't,
That's
so
why.
I will email it to you, okay?
I do this myself.
Thank you.
I'll send you an email so you have it.
I wondered why they were so thick, because they're.
Okay, so, second page. All right, so multi-tiered systems of support, you heard a great presentation by Teresa and Rebecca on the progress we have made there. So this year, we were gonna do bar training year 2 for the middle school and the high school. We were gonna implement a grade 10 as well, and this is that process by which teachers talk about every kid every week, make sure that we're not losing anybody in the cracks, and make plans for students who are behind. Making sure we have a common vision for MTSS. That is all the work that we've been doing this year. We've been crushing that, Teresa and Rebecca leading the way. And then definitely building that bank of tier 2 interventions for kids who are struggling academically and behaviorally. Certainly the change in our reading program is a big piece of that. The next one is about high quality training. So again, your bar stuff we've implementing with additional training. They did that this summer. And then we have now stipended positions for HPT leadership at the high school to strengthen the advisory program at the high school. So that is implemented, those people are doing that work. The next one is digital safety. So you heard Teresa talk about that was a piece of last night's Bike the Night. We have done smaller things, but not a district-wide thing. The reading thing really sort of overwhelmed. I'm not sure we fully appreciated how significant a heavy lift that was going to be. So we've done some small things, but not a major digital citizenship initiative. So that will probably have to remain as something we tackle after. So scroll past all that stuff. Okay, so in the area of instruction, making sure that we've got very flexible instructional practices. Our goals this year were to begin that development of a common assessment system. I know at the high school and at the middle school, they've been choosing those. I know in the reading we've got in the new reading program, we've been able to identify a couple of those that will become those common assessments. That is part of the work we're doing in Atlas. The design a method for collecting data among student fieldwork opportunities, we have not tackled that at all. That has not been a priority this year. And then implement with fidelity K-5 new reading instructional materials. That has been a huge heavy lift, and I would say we're feeling really good about that. I think preliminary data looks good, but again, I always get nervous about sort of saying too much until that final assessment gets done in the spring, just because it's a little bit different than how it works earlier in the year. But I think there's a lot of optimism, right? And I think lots of anecdotal evidence from teachers and students and parents who are seeing their kids do things that they weren't doing prior to. It has been a huge lift that teachers have really stepped up their game to do that. Skip all that data. All right, this one is curriculum development. So our goal this year was to develop a curriculum development team and a process. Yes, we've got that. Bring curriculum to board for approval. Teresa's talking about being ready to go with math standards, possibly an BPA, health PE. So what we originally had hoped for this year, that it would be English language arts, social studies, science. With the new reading program, we put off the ELA until next year, given that we now will have more information about how that work is going. Social studies standards were in flux at the state, so tackling that while they hadn't made up their mind yet didn't make any sense because any decision we make now will have to change. We have not been working on science. Math has sort of taken the place of science because we knew we were going to start looking at new instruction materials. So we've made some changes throughout the year, still making progress, and then that data collection for the common assessment system. We have the way to collect the data in the new reading program at the elementary level, so now it's a matter of us exporting that to be able to look across grade levels. That's in process.
There you go.
Yep. All right, the next one is co-curricular programs. So we did implement the stipend pot that you guys approved last year. We have some going at Leeds. We got slowed down by this, I will say, not because there wasn't willingness, but there were some issues with the stipend calculation. It required work with the association and an MOU. I don't know if you remember that, but you guys had to agree to change it. And so that just, we were gung-ho in September and I was getting ready to, and then we stopped because the formula didn't work. So that slowed things down. By not having that ready to go till like December, November, December, it sort of slowed things down. We do have some in process that were not in place, but I don't think it's gone as great as we would have hoped because of how we got started. But I'm hopeful there's lots of energy around it. Okay, keep going and get that. This one is enhancing supports for the staff. We did a ton of stuff last year. This year our main goal was the early release. So I've been working, I sort of update you guys regularly. I've provided some updates to families, daycare providers, and done work with all the leadership teams. When the calendar comes for your approval, that regular 1 hour early release will be in there. And so that's when we can have that debate about whether or not you want to move forward with that. The next one is fostering a culture of data to inform decision making. We are definitely in that consistent timeliness, systemic procedures for data review. We are definitely in this developing key performance indicators around our internal assessments. That is a part of the work we're doing for reading. And I would say the work we've done this year is going to inform the work we do with the new math materials next year without question. We've learned a lot and that we'll be able to make really good progress there. The next one is on reporting and grading, consistent timelines for data review, and the key indicators for those are both similar goals in here. We did have as a goal for this year is to look at faculty grading guides and parent guides for this year and next year. Some work has been done at individual schools, but not district-wide. That we have not been able to tackle, so that will probably have to move to next year in terms of how many things we can bite off at one time. The next one has to do with proactively engaging in communication. Communication crisis plan, it's almost done. I actually have received some training with the, that was title money that we used, that was for school safety, and engaged with Rink Advertisement, which is a local firm. They have produced this massive document that both Teresa and I have looked at. And we had an issue that didn't actually turn into an issue, but it had the potential to be an issue. So I practiced. I used the information they provided me to create what would have been the communication if Evan and I had needed to do that. So our next step will be to bring in the principals, make sure everybody knows what that plan looks like, and then just to implement it. So I feel really good. There's a lot of templates there, things that I hadn't thought about in terms of how to communicate with families in a crisis. Developing common expectation for school communication. We have done that. Every school now has a monthly newsletter, as well as what we're asking teachers to do. So that was work we did this summer, and people have been doing that consistently, so feel good about that. We didn't really have that in place there wasn't really an expectation for that. All right, what's the next one? Oh, school safety and facilities. Big push this year was reunification, and I am happy to say TES has run their drill and TMS has run their drill. Next up will be, I think we're going to try and do TPS and Green on the same day, and then Leeds on the remaining half days that we've got. So by the end of this school year, every single school, with the exception of the high school, will have come here and run a reunification drill as if, like if they got evacuated here from their building, not with students, just the staff. Even though we haven't revised the high school plan, all the staff members are running the reunification, so should the high school have to leave the campus, they've got a team of people who are running this for every other school, so they are going to be very well trained by the time it's done. They've now run through this 4 times, I think. So that's going really well. I'm very, very excited about that. That's been a heavy, heavy lift that I was not sure we were going to do. Facilities, complete the capital improvement process. We are well on our way, making great plans. Develop a plan to complete projects that utilize funds from the reserve account. Again, you said that. I swear to God we wrote this in September. It's working out. Long-term plan for potential bond. So that is in process. You saw that work tonight. And what's left? Oh, transportation. We have updated our policies and procedures to deal with student behavior. Has made major improvements. Lots of positives from bus drivers that they feel supported in that. Responding, and then continue to development of the bus driver training programs. Slower start than we had anticipated. Not as many people as we had hoped, but it's not dead. We're going to keep working on it. So that's where we are. That's the really short, fast version of the things that are driving the budget and the work that we're doing. Questions?
It's like,
Nice work.
yeah, it was like,
It felt kind of good going through it. I was like, oh my God, look at that. We actually said we're going to do that. We're doing it. The reunification, I will say I'm most proud of the reunification stuff. That is something that, as a principal, I had always sort of like, it was my secret fear in the back of my head, like, oh my God, if ever I had to do this, I don't know what we would do. So it makes me feel good to feel like the principals really will have a grip on that, should they ever have to do that.
yeah, on ESPN, was it like the fastest 3 minutes in sports, where you go through every single game in about 30 seconds? That's about what that felt like. It's great. I'm not seeing any questions on that anymore, so we'll move on to item 10.5, which is kind of a springboard from our workshop a couple meetings ago, and that is a motion for consideration and support of the superintendent's preference to maintain Drummond & Woodsum as the district's legal counsel, as well as the designation of Brandon Isaacson as counsel when the board directs the superintendent to acquire a second legal opinion. Is there a motion on the floor for that?
So moved.
Is there a second? Alex? Just to start here, again, the attempt here was to try to reflect some of the sentiment from our workshop recently. Part of that workshop, though, was some discussion to look for a list of additional firms that we might want to seek for second opinion, and I think, I don't know if you want to speak to how that went.
I sort of reached out to sort of see any other legal firms that did any work in education, and Brand Isaacson's really the only one, other than Drummond & Woodsum.
I think at the time we had just the immediate districts outlined.
Yep.
Drummond & Woodson and Brandon Isaacson, and
Yep.
after looking more
They're
statewide.
working, I guess they do work with multiple school districts in Aroostook County. They've got more up there. but-
Brandon Isaacson. does.
Yeah, Brand Isaacson.
Yeah, so.
Where are they based out of?
Auburn
Yeah.
or Lewiston. I don't know. One of the two.
Is it
Lewiston.
Okay. So, instead of a list, Brandon Isaacson for second opinions. Does anyone have any more they want to add to this discussion? Yes.
So a few days after the workshop, we were treated to some news that Drummond Woodsum had offered advice to some schools on how to legally tiptoe around enforcement of federal immigration laws. And that's the kind of work that a law firm should be doing. You ask for legal advice on how we would like to do something, and they say, well, if you want to do that, this is how you have to do it in order to not get in trouble. And so I don't necessarily fault them for doing that. They're just doing the service that their client asked them to do. But what they didn't do is do the same thing for us. When we asked for advice on how to, within the restrictions imposed by the Constitution, restrict certain content from our curriculum and libraries, basically the answer was you can't. And I asked very specific questions about very specific cases where the decisions were made, and I had a letter with quotations right from those, and I was met with a blank stare, like deer in the headlights. And what that tells me is that this is a firm that doesn't want to help on certain issues. And that's just not cool in my book. I expect a law firm to be able to very impartially look at the field of law and say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't, this is what we advise, we think this might be stepping too close to the line, you probably want to be back here. And they need to do that on every single issue that a client brings forward. But I don't feel the confidence. I don't feel that a law firm that is going to do that to a board can be relied on to advise on any legal issue in various professional development that they might offer, whatever. And it's unfortunate that they might be the only horse in town when it comes to some of those things. But I don't think that we should then just default and say, well, you know, they're going to be our primary source.
Anyone else have anything they want to add? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And abstention? Okay.
So was there just one, I just want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay.
One in opposition, one abstention, and everyone else was support. Okay, so with that, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Peter?
Sorry.
Oh, no,
Let
yeah,
him
we'll
go.
give it to Kyle.
You see how fast that was?
That was fast. And Peter's the second.
Second,
All those in
third.
favor?